One of the first things I did today, according to my recollection, is have a dream in which my teeth fell out. With me feeling the looseness of my own teeth within the dream. And it ending with me looking in the mirror to find, I think, all the teeth on the bottom left gone. And I think all the teeth on top gone too. With me clearly able to see my gums. According to what I saw recently while I think it was on Monday. That was the last time I recall going to the Seymour Union. One of the flat-screen TV projectors told me about how that kind of dream is a sign of a mental change coming up. Before I got this dinner, I took part in a pretty light walk at a pace of about 12 minutes a kilometer, or 20 minutes and 7 seconds, ultimately walking 1.67 kilometers. And then I went inside their nest for the first time. Once it could be assured that doing so wouldn't violate the maximum occupancy rule. Of 3, including any employees. I asked if they had any super coffee because it seemed like that would be healthier than a Mountain Dew Game Fuel while still aligning with my personal beliefs. Which should already be well known if you followed my channel for a while now. I'm currently following the election tonight on Daily Kos. There's a strong hope that tonight the Democratic Party will take control of the Senate, and there are also strong hopes that Biden will win the White House. A lot of crazy things have happened in the past 4 years. But that's the sort of rule with us. Where a million years is basically nothing for the universe, a year can be a whole lot for us, as the year 2020 has proved for us. I got a tofu taco, though unfortunately they didn't have any corn chips. Although admittedly, that probably wouldn't have been very healthy compared to some of the stuff I ultimately got. I carried my lunch in this bag, and it can be seen that it sort of spilled out a bit. This candy was from when I was leaving to go to my Spanish class. The RA desk had some candy out in display for anyone to freely take. I took some pieces, had one of the Sugar Babies packets in the bathroom. Because I think you can take your mask off if you're inside one of the stalls. So I figured that would be a good spot to eat without having to lift my mask up between each bite. And that ultimately explains why I always eat my lunch and dinners here in my dorm room. Seems like the daily exclusive is pretty much about to change. I think I'm pretty close to finishing up the last of the latest tasks Misty Force has given me. I completed the 8 relics through a combination of neighborly help chests and a recent scrolls tournament that sprung up, in which I got to collect scrolls relics, which ultimately boosted up my production of scrolls, which will ultimately help me to trade for the standard goods within my city. I currently have my sights set on getting the Golden Abyss Ancient Wonder, and a more distant item on the agenda is putting together the magical chess set. Thing is, I've so far only found room for 2 pieces, and I only have 3 pieces in total, with this being the 3rd piece. In Spanish class, we basically did some review, some practice with the terms K and can and canes, K without the accent, and low K as part of a series of terms that you basically use to combine two sort of similar sentences. both before and after my Spanish class today, I've been trying to study for this writing exam I'm going to have in my American Political Thought class tomorrow. Ultimately, there's no way for me to know for sure what questions I'm ultimately going to get. The purpose of this exam is to try and show your comprehension of what is basically of the Articles of Confederation, the flaws within them that were exposed by Shays' Rebellion and other events, and the perspective of the two different sides of the debate regarding the ratification of the Constitution. Specifically, the Federalist perspective and the Anti-Federalist perspective. I've boiled it down to these viewpoints. Each Federalist paper either advocates this viewpoint or counters this viewpoint, and vice versa for the Anti-Federalists. In regards to explaining how the Articles of Confederation served as a framework for the Constitution, I think that's relatively easy to understand. Some components we see in the Constitution today are ultimately derived from the Articles of Confederation, despite being seen as a failed experiment. And in that regard, things such as how some powers Congress has today are derived from it, such as the power to declare war. And I think the Articles of Confederation, from it, it ultimately was the backbone for the representation the states enjoy today within Congress via ultimately, that is how the states are represented, through the legislative branch of the two-house Congress. The two houses ultimately came from a compromise. In regards to the Senate ensures that every state is equal within the Senate and within the House. The states are represented by their population. Their population determines how many seats each state has within the House. Big states wanted representation through population. Small states wanted it to be equal. Both big and small states sort of got their way in the end. In regards to the anti-federalist viewpoint, in regards to the federal government doing violations against state rights and personal liberties, based on what I can recall, examples of the federal government doing this historically seems to come from the most extreme times. It was problematic to suspend habeas corpus, but that was probably seen as an emergency measure because it happened during the American Civil War. The internment camps were also really bad, but it can be argued this was a measure done for safety. Though likely, it was more likely done out of fear, but it happened during World War II. So yeah, there were cases where the federal government either violated state rights or individual rights. But those ultimately came during some pretty extreme, during the most extreme situations. Which may very well be part of the reason why a strong federal government was formed to protect us during extreme situations where if we had stuck with the Articles of Confederation, we would have been left at the mercy of whatever the state government decided to do. Though there have been recent efforts to ultimately give a bit more power to the states. That's been called devolution. Regardless, it can be easy to understand the perspective of both sides on the issue. Today I had a Senate committee meeting within the Brockport student government that was from 4 p.m. It was supposed to last until 5 p.m., but only really lasted about 15 minutes. Because it's understandable, there probably wasn't much to discuss because it was the first meeting of the semester at least. I'm just currently trying to think of potential questions I could be asked. Looking at the Spark Notes, what they have to say in regards to the Federalist Papers. And I know I should probably I need to look at the Anti-Federalist Papers too. And I'll be sure to make room for that. In regards to my criminal law class today, it was sort of canceled. Instead instead of the usual online session, there's just a posting of a short voice thread and 2 discussions we're each supposed to answer by Wednesday evening, which I'm hoping means to do it by midnight on Wednesday, basically before Thursday. That's what I'm hoping that means. Because I want to be as entirely focused on studying for this exam as possible. Because within my American political thought class, there's only ultimately 4 things that's going to dictate the whole grade. I've done well enough on the writing assignments to ultimately be getting an A- for the class. If I do really well, I could bump that up to an A. With a solid performance on both the exam and the final paper. But ultimately, there's no extra credit for the American political thought class. And I'll continue to monitor the election tonight as I study for the American political thought exam. That's going to consist of 4 short answer questions. And I guess that means they really will be short, because that means I only have 12 and a half minutes for each question within a 50-minute class. Basically, on average, each answer is probably just going to be a paragraph. And there obviously isn't enough time for me to write the equivalent of 4 essays on pen and paper like this. There's no time to list every single example that comes to mind. Only a sort of hope that I blindly come up with the strongest after sufficient studying. During the sort of walk I did prior to ultimately going to the Nest and then to Harrison to get dinner, I sort of got to around the campus mall before I turned back to walking towards Harrison to ensure I got back there in time to see the end of the 20-minute walk. At the end of the Spanish class, I asked my professor for the grammar topics I need to write grammar journals for. Since it's important, I catch up on that. So it was around the time of me doing the walk and me getting lunch at Harrison that I saw quite a few students from ROTC, which is an U.S. Army Officer Training Program, essentially. One right behind me in the line for Harrison told me that for runs in PT you're expected to do 6 to 7 minute miles. I'm nowhere near that capacity yet, but hopefully if I remain consistent with the runs on the Nike app, hopefully I'll eventually get to that point. And I ultimately showed the run I did on Monday that was significantly more intense than the sort of walk I did today. And the student who told me this also said that PT was their favorite part of being in the ROTC. The walk was also a time for me to try and let the thoughts of what I've been reviewing come to me.